Salutations, every pup, and welcome to Chapter 25 of the one they call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 25, Gran Torino. Chapter Summary. The Vestiges are excited to meet their old friend again. Maybe a little too excited. Izuku is just trying to get through his first day of internships without giving his new mentor a goddamn heart attack. Meanwhile, Toshinori finds something while cleaning the apartment. Author's notes. Hello, everyone. So, life's been a mess, but long story short, I managed to find a new internship which I very much enjoy. Just finished my first week and I absolutely loved it. Which means I finally found motivation again to start this arc, lol. It's been a while, so I'ma just update the status of where Izuku is regarding One for All. Full Cowl. He has figured out the principle of Full Cowl and managed to use it a few times. But it's more of a super move and not something he has learned how to use properly yet. Other quirks he has unlocked. Danger Sense. Active all the time. Float activates if he gets too excited. Black Whip only activates during the USJ. I think that's it so far. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this extra long chapter. Trigger warnings. Panic attacks. The Vestiges being gremlins. All Might bashing. Izuku's point of view. Nana, are you, okay? Izuku asked carefully. All he got in response was another loud groan as Nana buried her face deeper into her hands and shook her head, no. Come on, Nana, talk to us. What's happening? Yoichi asked, sounding worried. Yeah, is the old man okay? Diagoro asked, appearing next to her and glancing between her and the door. Despite not needing to breathe, Nana let out a deep and slow sigh. Aside from being a complete and utter idiot, she muttered, letting her hands drop to reveal a conflicted scowl on her face, I'd say he is doing just fine. Izuku blinked in confusion. There were a lot of mixed feelings coming from her right now. Most of them seemed to be ranging from annoyance and disapproval, but there was also amusement, which she clearly tried to hide behind her frown. Too busy trying to get a read on her emotions, Izuku almost didn't notice when Nana continued, her voice so low that he could barely hear it. He's also been lying in a pool of sausages and ketchup for God knows how long, she grumbled, crossing her arms and turning to glare back at the door. Upon Nana describing the scene, Izuku and the other Vestiges froze for a solid second, staring at her and wondering if they had heard that right. But then, all at once, the Vestiges burst out laughing, causing Izuku to flinch and Nana's scowl to slip away and reveal a grin, which she desperately seemed to try and fight back. Oh my god! Wait, really? We gotta see this! Before Izuku could even blink, Diagoro and a few of the other Vestiges suddenly stormed into the house, some of their forms too unstable to make out properly before they phased through the door. As soon as they entered the building, they started to laugh about the absurdity of whatever they saw on the other side. Holy shit! How long has he laid there? Diagoro wheezed out. His costume is white! That's never gonna wash out! Second laughed, sounding more amused than Izuku could ever remember hearing. Seriously, what was he thinking? Upon listening to the Vestiges roasting this poor old man and genuinely enjoying themselves, Izuku couldn't help but relax, and he soon started giggling too. The almost peaceful moment lasted way too shortly, though, when Nana, who had given up on appearing to look angry, suddenly stopped laughing. Her expression turned devious as she grinned down at Izuku, causing him to look up at her suspiciously. You know what? We should prank him back, Nana said, her grin only growing wider when the other Vestiges immediately agreed. The ones that had been busy antagonizing Gran Torino quickly returned back to their side, and together they started coming up with different ideas to mess with the man. Heck, even second and third were in on it. The two war heroes sounded like damn kids in a candy store. And as much as Izuku enjoyed hearing them all so happy, he couldn't help but worry. Not to mention how he was pretty sure that some of the stuff they were suggesting was considered illegal. What do you say, Izu? Want to make a big entrance? Nana asked him, her smile so bright it was almost blinding. Uh, um, I'm... I'm not sure, Izuku eventually mumbled, trailing off as he glanced down at the ground. Oh, come on, kid! Live a little! It's all in good fun! Diagoro reassured him, giving him a firm pat on the back, which actually made him stumble a little in place. They're getting stronger, he noted, wincing as he straightened up. For some reason, that small knowledge, along with the way they were so eager to use his body for pranks, of all things, did nothing to ease Izuku's worries. I don't even know him, Izuku fretted anxiously. What if he's mad? He asked, glancing towards the door and wringing his lip between his teeth in worry. He didn't want to upset the man who had practically raised his mentor. He won't be. Trust me, kiddo. He'll figure out it's us in no time and find it hilarious. Nana grinned, her voice filled with confidence. And if he by any chance gets mad, which he won't, then we'll take the full blame. Izuku gave the grinning vestiges one more hesitant look before he sighed in defeat. Oh, okay, but just be nice, he pleaded. Of course! Several voices answered in chorus, way too quickly to be truly sincere. With one last glance at the door, Izuku took a deep breath and closed his eyes, willing himself to relax. Ever since Nana accidentally took over last week, practicing possession had become much easier. All they really needed was a clear goal and a strong enough will, and they were good to go. And apparently, pranking this poor elderly hero was a strong enough common goal that the vestiges managed to take over his body in almost no time at all. Izuku watched, almost as if in a trance, as they stared down at the hands and flecked their fingers. Just like all the times before, one for all was lighting up their skin, giving their ghostly presence away. But for this, it was perfect. They giggled, and the next thing they knew, float activated. But with Nana being the one in the front, she easily managed to grab control of her old quirk, making them hover slightly off the ground. Not wanting to waste any more time, they grabbed their hero suitcase and hid it in the bushes next to the door. Then, they carefully schooled their expression and silently slipped inside the house, not even bothering to knock. And although he had been warned, Izuku was still a bit shocked at the scene he had stumbled upon. The man that was supposed to teach him for the next week was just lying there, on the floor, in a puddle of ketchup and sausages and flies flying around his head. This is the great Gran Torino that they had talked so much about? The mentor that had All Might trembling in fear? The man that even the stoic second and third seems to actually like? This is him? Oh no, the vestiges said, their voices echoing and overlapping with each other in a not familiar and breathy way, making them sound like something out of this world. Poor old man. Gran Torino apparently took that as cue as he suddenly whipped his head up and loudly exclaimed, I am live! If Izuku was currently in control of his body, he was sure he might have jumped or screeched at the slight jump scare. But, as it was, all Izuku could do was stare at this man from inside of his own mind, wondering what the heck he had gotten himself into. Izuku watched in tense silence as the vestiges floated closer, all while staring down at Gran Torino with a perfectly blank expression. Oh, That's a relief, they said, putting a glowing hand to their chest and faking a sigh of relief. And Izuku had to give it to them. They were good actors. So he's not dead yet, they continued, almost absent-mindedly, as they casually looked around the room, before letting their gaze fall back to the elder hero. How strange, though, to lie in food. I wonder if he's all right, they continued, tilting their head at the man. Gran Torino, to his credit, didn't seem too fazed by the glowing, floating kid in front of him, though he was definitely, and understandably, starting to get a little freaked out. Who are you? The man grumbled, getting up to his feet and looking them up and down with clear suspicion in his eyes. In the back of his mind, Izuku got a little worried, not putting it past a retired hero to perhaps mistake them for a shape-shifting villain or something. He also didn't put it past the pro to attack them, if that was the case. But just as he was about to tell the vestiges to maybe knock it off, their eyes widened, and they gasped in mock surprise, slapping a hand against their chest and causing them to float back a little. You can see me? They asked, causing Gran Torino's eyes to grow comically wide as he sputtered. And Izuku? Well, he might have laughed just a little. After all, it was a pretty clear callback to his first meeting with Yoichi, one he often thought back to with a smile. It seemed like Gran Torino finally had enough, and he took a step closer, glaring up at them. Last chance, kid. Who are you, and what the fuck are you talking about? The man barked out, looking strangely intimidating despite his short stature and ketchup stains covering his costume. Guys, maybe we should, Izuku started to say, only to get cut off as the vestiges continued, either completely unaware or uncaring of the slowly growing threat in front of them. Oh my god, you can? They fretted, lifting their hands in a soothing motion and floating just a small bit closer, as if they were trying to comfort him. Oh no, oh, I'm so sorry. Gran Torino seemed to split between being angry and confused as hell, before deciding to settle on confusion. What the hell are you sorry about? He asked, still eyeing them with suspicion. They gave him a sheepish smile and gestured towards themselves. Well, I mean, if you see me, then... They paused, as if they were too nervous to continue, while in reality they had to pause so they wouldn't burst out laughing. Then... that means you are dead, too, sir, they finished saying, voice wobbling just a little. As one would expect, being told you were dead did not sit well with the man, and he growled, Quit spouting nonsense! I'm not, though. They cut him off, floating backwards and out of reach just in time to avoid the man grabbing them. You need to calm down, sir. Think about it. And look at me. Do I look alive to you? You're literally talking to a ghost. To be completely honest, they were telling the truth. He was talking to a ghost. Several ghosts, in fact. I saw you at the sports festival, Gran Torino growled, lunging forward to try and hit them, only for them to once again avoid his grasp. Like hell, I'm gonna believe that the brat somehow managed to die on the way here. They continued bickering back and forth, while Gran Torino chasing them around and seemingly getting more and more frustrated with every failed attempt. Even with the man's quirk, the vestiges somehow managed to skillfully avoid him, making sure to keep his body floating just outside of reach to keep up the illusion of them being a ghost. At first, it was a bit funny, but as time went on, Izuku started to grow concerned. How long were they going to keep this up? Nana was the first to get worried. She went from trying not to laugh to growing concerned, wondering why her friend hadn't realized it was her. The others agreed how it was a bit weird that he hadn't connected the dots already. And yet, none of them made any attempt to put a stop to this prank, determined to keep messing with the other hero. But seeing the growing distress on the old man's face, Izuku had enough. He really didn't want the poor man to have a heart attack and actually die or something. That's why, in the middle of a sentence, while the vestige's focus were elsewhere, Izuku turned all of his energy on the front and to get back in control. After a moment of twisting and turning, he finally felt the familiar click, and he was suddenly hit with the full weight of gravity as he lost control of his quirks and tumbled down to the ground. The vestiges booed, but Izuku just sat up and rubbed the back of his head with a groan. "I told you to be nice!" Izuku hissed, wincing a bit at the way the room seemed to spin around him. "And telling someone they are dead isn't nice, so you are gonna stay in there and think about what you did. Also, my head hurts," he muttered, massaging. Before they could answer, they heard a grumbled, "What the fuck?" And Izuku looked up to meet the wide eyes of Gran Torino, who had stopped his chase and was now staring down at him in confused horror. "Oh, hi, Gran Torino-san. I'm Midoriya Izuku," he greeted him awkwardly with a small wave of his hand. He was still feeling dizzy and, therefore, stayed seated on the ground, not wanting to fall over again. Sorry about that. I tried to tell them not to, but Nana and the others thought it would be funny." At the mention of Nana, the man seemed to choke and he grew awfully pale. "What did you say?" the man wheezed out, sounding like someone had punched him right in the gut. Izuku blinked at the hero, confused at his reaction. After all, Gran Torino should have already been briefed about their situation from All Might. No way would the man choose not to inform him of something that important. Realization hit him like a brick, and it was Izuku's time to pale, his eyes growing wide in horror as he stared at the hero. Did All Might not tell you about the vestiges?" he asked, his voice sounding faint even to his own ears. Inside his mind, he heard several sharp breaths as the vestiges seemed to realize what had just happened, and he could feel their shared fear and anxiety growing worse by the second, while guilt and regret flooded through their veins. "That knucklehead hasn't talked to me in years," the older man muttered. At the confirmation, Izuku's skin suddenly lit up like thunder, and they growled out of frustration, "God damn it, Toshi!" causing the man in front of them to jump back in surprise. Noticing what they did, they took a deep breath, forcing themselves to calm down, and pushing down the ever-growing rage they felt boiling in their chest. It was hard, though, not being angry. After all, Nana had been so happy to meet her old friend again. She had been looking forward to this reunion for a week. All of the vestiges had been looking forward to it. And her friend didn't even know about them? He didn't even know about Nana still being here? Or how Izuku could use their quirks? Or anything? What the hell was Toshi thinking? "Sorry," Izuku mumbled, moving to stand up on trembling legs as he fought against the urge to call Toshi and yell at the old fool. You should probably sit down for this. It's a pretty long story," he said, gaining a nod in response. "Right, I'll just go and grab something to drink," Gran Torino muttered. Izuku moved to follow him before pausing. "Oh, shoot! My hero suit!" he gasped, before rushing outside to fetch the suitcase that was, thankfully, still laying in the bushes. Shoulda would have killed him if he lost his suit on the very first day. Walking back inside, he found Gran Torino already sitting down at the kitchen table, a glass of water in his hand and a scowl on his face. Izuku's stomach twisted at the sight of the kitchen table, as well as the scowl. Too many bad memories of discussions happening in similar settings. Why don't we sit over there?" Izuku asked, gesturing to the beat-down and ragged couch. Gran Torino gave him a weird look, and Izuku suppressed the urge to wince. "Please?" he pleaded, not wanting to explain his weird trauma. The man grumbled something about damn kids, but still moved to the couch. "Alright, kid, what the hell is going on?" Gran Torino asked, crossing his arms and glaring at him. Taking a deep breath, Izuku settled down on the other side of the couch and turned to the elder hero. And so began the awkward conversation about meeting All Might, getting One for All, learning about the vestiges being present inside the quirk, and everything it entailed. Minus the whole being a cat thing, obviously. And, yeah, that's it. I guess, Izuku finished explaining with a shrug. The man, who had barely said a word the time Izuku was talking, let out a deep and long sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. Izuku was sure that if he hadn't met the vestiges already, then he probably wouldn't have believed him. "You're telling me Nana is still here," the man eventually muttered, lowering his hand in order to look up at Izuku with tired eyes. "Yes, or, well, her vestige, at least, along with the other 6 users before her. I'm not exactly sure what they are," Izuku sheepishly answered. "And All Might has known about this for how long did you say?" "A few months, give or take." There was a loud bang as Gran Torino suddenly slammed his hand down on the table, making Izuku jump at the sound. "For fuck's... And that goddamn idiot couldn't bother giving me a single call and tell me any of this stuff?" he growled, standing up to pace around the room. Izuku watched him, one hand covering his heart while he was still trying to calm down after that scare. Watching him pace and curse under his breath, Izuku couldn't help but feel bad for the man. The vestiges felt horrible too. It was obvious they never would have pulled such a cruel prank if they had known. Nana kept repeating apologies in their head, having been so sure the man would have seen through their prank immediately and laughed at it. It was overwhelming, this amount of regret and guilt, and Izuku desperately wanted out. He needed them to move past this. Izuku cleared his throat. "To be fair," he said carefully, only to flinch when Gran Torino's stern gaze turned to him. "He didn't tell his own husband about One for All until just recently either." The man had finally stopped pacing and was now staring at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That idiot finally told Aizawa?" Izuku's lips tugged up into a smile. "Yup, I might have let it slip," he chuckled. "Good riddance. It was about time. Never thought I'd live to see the day. And how did the poor man take it?" Izuku's smile turned sad, and he did his best not to grimace at the memory. Uh, um, Aizawa didn't take it so well, but they're still together and, trying to patch things up." Gran Torino collapsed back into the couch with a sigh. "I have no idea how he does it. If it were me, I would have killed the moron right then and there," he grumbled, earning a chuckle from Nana and agreement from some of the other vestiges. It was silent for a while after that, until Gran Torino cleared his throat. "Thanks for telling me all this," the man grumbled, turning to look at him. "I'm glad that he at least managed to find someone honest as his successor." Izuku flinched and looked away, his hands coming up to fiddle with his shirt. "I'm really not," he muttered, before shaking his head. Anyway, so about my internship?" By the time they had finished talking, about the vestiges, the quirks, and his internship, half the day had already passed. And by then, Izuku was more than eager to get changed into his hero costume and get started with some actual training. He had been warned by both All Might and the Vestiges that Gran Torino was a strict teacher. Tough love, Nana called it. And although Aizawa was also a strict teacher, especially when it came to things like quirkless combat, Izuku soon learned that training with Gran Torino was very different from what he was used to. "Come on, kid. Activate your quirk and let's get started already," Gran Torino scoffed impatiently, glaring at him and tapping his foot against the floor. Izuku just stared at him, mouth agape and eyes wide. Did the hero seriously expect them to jump headfirst into quirked combat? What? Here? What if I use too much power, or break something, or hurt you, or... Before he could even blink or register what happened, Gran Torino had taken off, and Izuku found himself having been kicked down and laying on the floor, staring at the ceiling in shock and confusion. "You really overthink a lot, don't you?" Gran Torino grumbled from where he hovered over him. Izuku shakingly got back up to his feet. "It's just my quirk, one for all. It's strong, and if I'm not careful, then it can end badly, both for myself and others," he mumbled, biting his lip, as he remembered all the times Aizawa had to stop him before anyone got hurt. Or how the Vestiges and All Might would constantly remind him of how dangerous this power was. He couldn't risk losing control. "That's true, but if you're too careful, you'll never get anywhere," the hero scoffed. "Seriously, is this how they've been training you? By making you fear using your own quirk? What about all that plus ultra energy, huh? Face it, kid, they've been coddling you. You're gonna need to get those shackles off if you wish to improve, or you aren't gonna save anyone." He stared at the older hero, almost dropping his jaw in disbelief. No, they... He started to defend his teachers, only to hesitate and click his mouth shut. After all, Aizawa clearly had no trouble pushing him past his limit in the past, or when they were doing quirkless training. But every time he tried to push the limit with this quirk, every time he risked breaking himself, Aizawa, All Might, and even the Vestiges were always there to stop him. And although he understood why they did it, after all, it was a very powerful quirk, but it could also be a bit frustrating. Almost like they were babying him or something. Realization hit him like a ton of bricks and his eyes widened. Holy shit! Maybe they have been coddling me. Izuku was pretty sure they didn't mean anything bad by it. He wasn't even sure that they were fully aware that they did it, but it still felt like a slap in the face, realizing that they didn't truly believe in him. Inside his head, he heard the buzzing of the Vestiges. They were clearly arguing about something, seemingly disagreeing between each other over what Gran Torino had said. And although Izuku couldn't hear all that they were saying, he could tell how some of them, probably second and third, agreed with what the elderly hero said, while others, like Yoichi and Nana, were disagreeing, claiming he didn't need to hurry and risk another injury. But for once, Izuku paid them no mind. Instead, he focused on himself. Because if that was true, if he had been holding back, then he needed to step up and do better, just like he told Todoroki. Sure, he shared his body with 7 ghosts, but at the end of the day, this was his quirk now, his power, and he wouldn't let his fear hold him back from using it. Taking a deep breath, Izuku let One for All flare up and spread out along his limbs. By now, the buzzing of full cowl was familiar enough that he barely even flinched when it reached 5%. "That's more like it. Now are you ready to train for real?" Gran Torino asked with a grin. No, Izuku didn't think he was ready at all. Like always, the power felt overwhelming and like he would break if he even so much as moved. But despite that, he took a trembling step forward and got into a fighting position. Plus Ultra, he repeated in his mind, determined to overcome this. "I'm ready," he said with a strained smile, gaining an even wider grin from the elder hero in return. They spent a long time training full cowl after that. The concept of the training was fairly simple. Keep full cowl activated and try to hit Gran Torino before the elder hero hit him. And predictably, Izuku was nowhere near being able to keep up with the speed hero. A few times, Izuku found himself flinching from the strain of using his quirk, causing the power to fizzle out in fear of breaking himself again. But even so, he kept going, ignoring the ache in his limbs or how his bones would seem to creak if he moved too quickly. At first, some of the vestiges had loudly protested inside his mind, but once they realized he wasn't listening, they quickly gave up and instead started giving him advice or encouraging words. He knew that if Aizawa was here, he would probably have forced him to stop a long time ago. And somehow, that thought caused Izuku to push himself even more, desperate to prove that he could do it, that he wasn't some useless Deku anymore. And with every try, it got easier. He would be able to hold his quirk longer. He would flinch less, and even get close to catching up with Gran Torino a few times. Aside from the intense game of tag, they also tried to figure out how to train his other quirks too, although with little to no success. Sure, he managed to float a few centimeters above the ground when Gran Torino asked him about his favorite heroes, which is All Might and Eraserhead, obviously, followed closely by Nezu. But other than that, they didn't manage to activate anything new and focused mostly on getting him used to using full cowl. After hours of getting his ass beat and having memorized the taste of the hardwood floor, Izuku managed to get the man to show him some mercy, and they had some dinner before he headed up to bed. It wasn't even 8 p.m. yet, but after having repeatedly pushed One for All to its limits the whole day, not to mention the emotional turmoil from this morning, Izuku was exhausted. His other quirk was also reaching its limits, and he would rather not turn into a tiny kitten in front of his new mentor. After some eye-rolling and grumbling, Gran showed him to the guest room, which was literally just the attic, with the messily made mattress stuffed in the corner. Not that Izuku was complaining or anything. After all, he had slept in way worse places, and at least it seemed clean up here. He quickly got changed into one of his shorts and t-shirts, eyeing some of the new bruises decorating his skin. His whole body felt sore, but at least nothing seemed to be broken, so Izuku counted that as a win. Once he finished getting changed, Izuku set his alarm so he would wake up before Gran Torino the next morning. He then changed form, slumping in relief as some of the ache in his body almost immediately went away. The bruise still hurt, but at least he didn't have to deal with the strain of pushing past his time limit. Broccoli stretched before he leaped up on the mattress and crawled under the covers. It was surprisingly soft, and before he knew it, he fell asleep, dreaming about being home with his family. Earlier that day, Toshinori's point of view. Shortly after Shinso had arrived that morning, Toshinori had left the apartment for a quick morning patrol. Ever since the USJ incident and his time limit went down to 2 hours, he had been banned from using his form for more than 1.5 hours per day, keeping the half hour that was left secured for emergencies only. And seeing how he didn't have any lessons today, he decided to go out as All Might. Nothing that should take too long, just a quick stroll around the city to show the people that he was here. By the time he got back, Shoda had left a note, letting him know that he had dragged their student back to UA to train. With only half an hour left of his hero form for that day, Toshinori found himself home alone to rest. Resting had never come easy to him, though, and with no class or student to teach, he soon found himself bored out of his mind. At least he wasn't completely alone. After all, he had Slushy, that heart, to keep him company. He ended up working on some assignments, feeling like he had to do something useful. The TV was on as background noise while he worked, and Slushy was napping contentedly on his lap. And for a while, all was peaceful. Way too soon, though, Toshinori found himself with no more work left. He tried to sit still for Slushy's sake, not wanting to interrupt her sleep, but eventually he couldn't stay still anymore, and he got up to start restlessly moving stuff around and cleaning their apartment. He really couldn't wait for Midoriya and their other students to get back from their internships. While cleaning out their office, Toshinori briefly changed into his Firo form to move one of their heavier cabinets to the side, thinking he might as well do a deep clean of the place. Dust swirled from the sudden movement, and he coughed as he put the cabinet down at the side, being mindful not to put it on the cat that was circling his legs. He changed back with another cough and moved to grab the vacuum cleaner, only to stop and blink in confusion when he saw an innocent-looking cable plugged into the wall. Frowning, he crouched down and inspected the cable. It looked to be some kind of phone charger, and although he wasn't very good at tech stuff, he was still pretty sure it wasn't for any model him or Shota had. Shrugging, Toshinori unplugged the thing from the wall, thinking they had probably forgotten it there a long time ago, before they put the cabinet in front of the socket. As soon as he unplugged it, though, Slushy rushed forward and started trying to nip it and swatting at it with her paws.
Slushy, no, this is not a toy,
Toshinori chuckled, moving the cable away so she wouldn't accidentally destroy it with her sharp teeth and claws. But then, Slushy moved her head forward, and all Toshinori could do was blink in confusion when Slushy started purring and stroking her head against the cable almost lovingly. He shook himself out of his stupor and stood up, earning him a sad meow from the cat. He smiled apologetically and petted her before moving to put the charger in one of the desk drawers.
Sorry, girl, it's not a toy,
he repeated, wondering just what had gotten into her and frowning when she continued to meow and stare at the drawer almost sadly. After his find, Toshinori made extra sure to look at every other socket in the walls, not wanting them to have any other random cables just laying around connected to the wall. It was 7 p.m. when Shota and their student finally got back home. They hadn't even gone out on any patrols yet, and the poor kid was already looking exhausted. While Shinso had headed to take a shower, Toshinori and Shota started making dinner. He briefly mentioned the charger he had found and asked Shota about it, to which Shota just frowned in confusion and shook his head, not knowing what he was talking about.
Hold on, I'll go get it,
Toshinori offered, making sure to turn the heat down on the stove before going to fetch the charger and handing it to Shota. The man took the object and studied it, turning it around in his hands.
You said you found it plugged in beneath the cabinet?
Toshinori nodded his head and kept stirring the pot.
Yes, I was a bit surprised, considering how hard it is to reach. I figured perhaps one of us forgot to unplug it before remodeling the office.
For a moment, Shota was quiet as he kept staring at the thing, a thoughtful expression on his face before he put it down with a sigh. Well, I guess it is possible that we forgot about it. It was at that moment that Shinso stepped into the kitchen and they quickly changed the subject. By the time the food was done, it was past 8 p.m., and Toshinori apologized to the kid, knowing he must be starving. The boy looked a bit confused at the apology and reassured him it was fine and thanked him for the meal. It reminded him a lot of his successor, and he found himself missing their kid student.
I wonder if young Midoriya is eating properly.
They sat down at the table and had just started eating when Toshinori's phone started ringing. His face flushed bright red as his ringtone of
"A phone call is here"
was playing obnoxiously on repeat. Across from him, Shota smirked, and Shinso looked at him funnily, probably mistaking him for an otaku. With his face a deep red, Toshinori scrambled for his phone and stood up, intending to leave the dinner table to talk. He answered the call, not even looking at the caller ID. Big mistake.
Hello? Why the fuck did you not tell me that the brat was haunted by ghosts? What the hell were you thinking?
The voice was loud enough for the others to hear, and he heard Shinso briefly choke on his food before Toshinori hurried out of the room, before locking himself in their office.
I'm sorry, sir. You're sorry? You're fucking sorry? You're gonna have to do better than that. A little warning would have been appreciated. Do you have any idea what kind of hell you put us through?
Toshinori winced and curled into himself as he listened to his mentor rambling. He didn't dare interrupt, instead just listening and nodding along, even if the man couldn't see him. After all, Toshinori was very well aware of the fact that he, once again, had fucked up. The least he could do was let the man rant at him. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Hitoshi's point of view.
Are you okay?
Aizawa asked, handing Hitoshi a glass of water. Hitoshi gratefully took the glass, taking a few big gulps before he cleared his throat. Fine, he croaked out, before taking another sip of water and trying again. Was that by any chance Midoriya's mentor? Aizawa raised an eyebrow at him and leaned back in his chair. What makes you think that? Hitoshi couldn't help but let out a small chuckle, and he rubbed the back of his neck. Considering he's the only one in our class I know who is haunted by ghosts, it seemed like a fair guess. You know about that? Aizawa asked, looking surprised. Oh, yeah? He, I mean, they kind of showed up at the sports festival after I used my quirk on him. He said you knew about them, so I just assumed most people in class knew. He trailed off, suddenly not sure what to say. His teacher still looked surprised, which confused Hitoshi. Was him knowing this such a big deal? Why wouldn't Midoriya tell him about them? After all, it was such a huge part of his quirk. Not to mention how the guy had told him about it so quickly after they literally just met. And after learning that their teacher already knew about it, he kind of assumed it would be common knowledge among the other students. But looking at the way Aizawa was staring at him, surprise clear on his face, he guessed that maybe that wasn't the case. I see, his teacher eventually said, his face going back to a carefully blank mask as he glanced back at the closed door to the office. I'm not sure what he has told you, but I'm glad he has someone alive to talk to. The man paused, casting another glance over at the office door before settling his gaze on Hitoshi. Did he tell you anything else? Aizawa asked him carefully. Hitoshi frowned and shook his head. No, he answered, studying his teacher and wondering what he was hiding. Is there anything else I should know? For a moment, Aizawa simply stared at him before shaking his head. No, not really. Not unless he chooses to tell you himself. Aizawa sighed. Before Hitoshi could ask anything else, his teacher looked at the time and spoke again. We will head out in 20 minutes. Make sure you finish eating and have everything ready by then. Internally, Hitoshi winced at the idea of going out. He was exhausted and just wanted to sleep, but he didn't let it show and instead nodded his head, determinedly, feeling nervous about going out on his first patrol. Before they headed out, Aizawa went to let his partner know. Yagi-san was still loudly getting yelled at, and Hitoshi honestly felt bad for the poor man. Seriously, what could Midoriya, and the ghosts, have possibly done that was just so bad that his mentor would call and yell at UA secretary after just the first day? Sorahiko's point of view. Sorahiko was aware of his status as a strict teacher, but despite what some might say, he did have a damn heart. Normally, he would push his students way over their normal limits, but considering how tired and in pain the boy had looked, and how much the kid had already strained himself using his quirk that day, Sorahiko decided that he deserved a break. So, even though it wasn't even 8 p.m. yet, Sorahiko showed the brat some mercy and let him go to bed early. The kid had basically slumped in relief and thanked him, wishing him a good night before heading upstairs. As soon as he was sure the brat was asleep, Sorahiko went to make a very important phone call to a certain idiot. After shouting at Toshinori for about an hour, Sorahiko felt a little bit better. Don't get him wrong, he was still furious, but he felt a tiny bit better after having let off that steam. The rest of the evening was spent wallowing in his own thoughts, his mind being way too loud for him to be able to properly fall asleep or relax. He sighed and glanced at the clock. It was just a little past 4 a.m., and he had barely gotten a wink of sleep. For a moment, he stared at the time, before an idea hit him, and he grinned as he got up and put on his costume to go and pay the kid a visit. After all, villains could attack whenever and wherever. They wouldn't care if he was sleeping or not. So it was only fair he scared the kid a bit. And not at all that he wanted revenge after their prank yesterday. Besides, he had been nice and let the kid go to sleep early, meaning that making him get up early was a fair compromise. Get up, kid! He yelled, kicking the door open, and getting ready to drag the kid off the bed and down the stairs. Only, the kid wasn't there? Instead, Tsuruhiko found himself staring dumbfounded as a small and fluffy ball jumped high into the air, letting out a terrified shriek. What the shit? Is that a cat? Tsuruhiko's eyes widened, and he looked frantically around the dark room, then down at the black cat that was growling and creeping away from him. The damn thing looked downright feral, with its back arched and teeth bared. It looked seconds away from either attacking him or bolting out the door. Did the brat let it in here? I swear, kids these days, no respect at all. Who lets us stray into someone else's house without even saying anything? He scowled down at the feline, not liking the way it was still growling at him, like he was the intruder in his own home. He'd let the damn brat know what Tsuruhiko thought about this, when he could actually find him. With a huff, he flicked the light on, earning a loud hiss from the cat as it took another step back, its fur standing on end and its tail thrashing violently behind it. He blinked down at the small animal, taking in its odd appearance and noticing that it wasn't black like he originally thought. Is that green fur? Definitely not a normal cat. And those eyes, bright green and familiar eyes, stared back at him, watching him intensely as if it was studying his every move. With another frantic look around the room, that he had seen the brat enter earlier that night, and finding it still empty except for this random cat, Tsuruhiko finally felt his sanity break. His eyes flickered back to the cat. The green cat. That had been sleeping in the green-haired brat's bed, with said brat being gone. Kid? Immediately after he said that, the cat tried to bolt around him and out of the room. But Tsuruhiko was faster, and with reflexes he didn't know he still had, he easily caught it by the nape of its neck. He held it up in front of him, frowning as it slumped in his grasp, as if accepting defeat. The cat, Midoriya, was avoiding to look at him and was glaring down at the floor. It was letting out a low and unhappy growl, although it was much more quiet than before. Kid, he tried again. Is that you? There was a moment of silence as it stopped growling and the cat's ears fell flat against its head, its tail flickering in annoyance. Eventually, though, it gave a stiff nod, still not looking at him. Tsuruhiko turned to take a deep breath. Tsuruhiko took a deep breath, and with his hand that wasn't holding the teenager, turned cat, he pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the start of a headache building up. It was only the first day, and not only is the kid haunted by a bunch of ghosts, but he also somehow managed to get turned into a cat. Really, Toshinori? What kind of successor did you find? Okay, Tsuruhiko sighed, dropping his hand to once again stare at the cat brat. What happened? Was it a villain? He asked. Because, seriously, how else would the supposedly quirkless kid he was supposed to watch suddenly turn into a small feline in the middle of the night? But to his confusion, Midoriya only shrunk into himself, his tail curling up between his legs as he shook his head. No? Then what? He asked, maybe a bit too harshly, judging by the way Midoriya flinched. The cat frowned and raised a paw, tapping it against his mouth, before shaking his head with a frustrated huff. Can't speak? He asked. And then, just because he couldn't resist, he added, Cat got your tongue? Tsuruhiko grinned when he saw a piece of the kid's soul die from the bad joke, the green tail giving an especially violent twitch in annoyance. He chuckled at the sight before his smile dropped and he scratched the back of his head, looking the small cat over. This was not exactly what he had imagined when he decided to take in an intern. Well, I'm not sure what to do here, kid, he sighed. Should I call All Might? At the mention of his mentor, whom Tsuruhiko had quickly figured out that Midoriya adored, the cat's fur stood on end, and his eyes grew almost twice their size in what he could only assume was fear as he frantically shook his head no. That certainly was an interesting reaction. He made sure to file that away for later. No? Well, okay then. But can you turn back? Kind of hard talking to you like this. Midoriya gave a tentative nod before looking down at the floor, making a gesture with his paw that looked like he was asking to be let down. As soon as he let go, the cat jumped back and rushed towards the corner farthest away in the room. Then, with a cloud of smoke, the kid was back, sitting curled up into himself on the floor, his back firmly pressed into the corner and his face buried into his knees, as he hugged them tightly to his chest. And Sadahiko had to admit, he almost felt bad for the kid, but he had a reputation to hold. So instead of showing his concern, he just crossed his arms and leaned against the wall behind him.
Well, care to explain?
He huffed, though he made sure to keep his tone softer than he normally would. The kid flinched, and for a moment he didn't move or reply. But just as Sorahiko was about to repeat the question, Midoriya slowly untangled himself. The boy stayed seated on the floor, but lifted his face enough to look up at him. And he really was just a kid, wasn't he? In that moment, Sarahiko could truly see just how young and scared the small boy was. Way too young to carry the burden of One for All. Not that anyone could ever be old enough for that kind of responsibility. I'm sorry, Midoriya stammered quietly.
Sorry about what, exactly?
He asked with a sigh. Because, really, Sarahiko still wasn't exactly sure what the hell was going on here. For, not being honest? The kid stammered, looking away and curling further into himself. I am... I'm not exactly quirkless. Sadahiko's mind came to a stop, and he did his best to keep his surprise from showing as he asked,
You lied to All Might?
He didn't want to admit it, but he was honestly a little bit impressed. After all, it took some real guts to lie to the number one hero. That, or stupidity. Sadahiko wasn't sure where to place this kid yet. I didn't want to, the kid cried out. But my quirk is... It's not suited for heroics. It's weak and useless. He suddenly winced and hissed as if in pain, a hand coming up to grasp at his head. Sadahiko tensed and took a step forward.
Kid?
Sorry, it hurts. And I can't stay on one form for too long. Can we talk tomorrow, please? He let out a slow breath and forced himself to relax, feigning indifference.
Afraid not, kid. I'm gonna need a few more answers. So, unless it's life-threatening, then you can handle it. See it as a punishment for lying.
And although Sadahiko tried to sound firm, he couldn't help but worry about the boy. After all, this was someone he had seen literally break his bones over and over during the sports festival while barely flinching. But right now, he looked ready to pass out from the pain. And Sadahiko wondered if perhaps he shouldn't if perhaps he should just give the kid a break. But before he could take it back, Midoriya nodded, looking defeated.
Alright, let's keep it short.
Sadahiko sighed, getting another nod in return.
Now tell me, what exactly is this quirk you have kept secret, and what else have you lied about?
It was a fair question, especially considering he was responsible for this kid for the upcoming week. He really couldn't take any more surprises. Not at his age. He briefly wondered what Nana and the other vestiges thought about this mess. Surely they were aware of the kid having a second quirk, right? And they could obviously take over, so why had none of them told Toshi or him about this? Okay, so, I was a late bloomer? Midoriya mumbled, biting his lip and keeping his gaze firmly on the floor. I, have the extra toe joint and everything, and, well, until I was 12, I never showed any symptoms of having a quirk. At that last part, the kid glanced up at him, as if trying to gauge his reaction to him being apparently quirkless. And Sadahiko didn't blame him. He knew the way quirkless people were treated, and with every generation, it only seemed to get worse. He had seen the statistics, and it wasn't pretty. It was ridiculous how ignorant and hateful people could be. He really couldn't understand it. After all, Sadahiko's own mother was quirkless. Didn't mean she was less human than the rest of them. Instead of saying anything, though, Sadahiko just gestured for the boy to continue, the kid seeming to relax a little, his shoulders the kid seemed to relax a little, his shoulders looking less tense as he continued speaking. But then, well, I transformed into that, he said with a grimace. It was pretty bad timing, too, since. Anyway, I got pretty hurt by some other kids, and then. Oh boy, there's no easy way to say this. The kid tugged at his hair, an almost hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat as he stared at the floor in front of him. Kid, Sadahiko said, now growing worried for a completely different reason. So you know that All Might and Aizawa have two cats? Midoriya blurted out. Sadahiko's eyebrows rose, mind trying to keep up with the weird change in subject. So what I'm, trying to say is, I guess before meeting All Might as Mentoria Izuku, they kind of already knew me. The boy chuckled. Their eyes met, and Sorahiko suddenly realized where this was going. No fucking way. Only, not as me, the kid continued, voice stumbling over the words. But, as their pet cat, Broccoli. The silence that followed was almost deafening, and for a moment, all Sadahiko could do was stare at him, wondering if he had heard that correctly. When the silence kept dragging on, Midoriya glanced up at him, wide green eyes staring at him with so much fear, and Sadahiko got reminded of just a moment ago when he saw those same eyes on the cat, on Broccoli's face. Sadahiko really couldn't help himself. He started laughing. Midoriya immediately scrambled to his feet. I'm so sorry. Please don't tell them about this. I don't want them to know that I've been lying to them all this time, he rambled, hands waving in front of him and looking torn between staying and running away. Holy shit, this goddamn gremlin of a brat! Once Sorahiko finally managed to compose himself, he turned to look at the brat, who looked about ready to throw up from anxiety. Kid? Yes? Midoriya squeaked out, straightening his back. You know I said that You know how I said at least you were honest? You know how I said at least you were honest? Sadahiko sighed, wiping away some tears. God damn, he hadn't laughed that hard in years. Yes, the boy said meekly, hunching into himself. I take that back. You are just as bad as Toshinori. Midoriya flinched and turned his gaze down to the floor while he started apologizing again. I'm sorry. And I'm no snitcher. The kid froze and whipped his head up to stare at him. What? I kept my mouth shut for All Might all these years. It would be pretty damn shitty of me not to do the same thing for you. Not to mention, Sorahiko wanted to see how long it would take Nana's idiot of a successor to figure this out. Seriously, how that fool managed to reach number 1, he would never understand. Just thinking of Toshi being so oblivious to his own damn cat being his successor was enough to almost have him start laughing again. No way was he going to spoil the fun. However, as amusing as it was, there were quite a few concerning things surrounding all of this. That being said, this quirk, which is something you obviously see as a weakness, is something we're gonna have to work with, starting later. He glanced at the clock. It was past 4:30 a.m., and looking at how tired the kid seemed, he guessed he could use another hour or two of sleep. For now, get some sleep, brat. I'll wake you up in a few hours, he said sternly, turning to walk back out the door. But weren't you the one who... Sleep, he ordered, giving the brat a sharp glare over his shoulder. Yes, sir, the boy yelped. Sadahiko gave another chuckle as he walked out the door, closing it behind him. It wasn't until he reached the bottom floor and sat down heavily on the couch that he let his face fall, feeling utterly exhausted.
Jesus Christ. You really know how to choose him, don't you, Toshinori?
Well, whatever. The kid had a second quirk? Doesn't really matter. His job was still the same as before. Whack this kid into shape for a week and make sure he doesn't die on the first day out in the field. And that would mean the kid would need to face his other side of himself, whether he wanted to or not. Sadahiko did not care. Whatever weird past or reason the kid had for wanting to keep his quirk hidden didn't matter either. The kid would need to learn how to defend himself, even in that form. After all, a ruthless villain wouldn't stop just because he turned into a fluffy cat mid-fight. And Sadahiko was going to make damn sure the brat was ready if, or when, that happened.
Better start thinking of a new plan,
he grumbled, grabbing the papers of the week's schedule and starting to make some changes. Behind him, unbeknownst to Sadahiko, multiple sets of eyes were watching him in silence, shooting him grateful looks before they disappeared back upstairs to check on their kid. Author's notes. Aizawa, stopping Izuku from using his quirk, teaching him quirkless fighting, and making sure he can fight even without a quirk and without permanently damaging his body. Gran Torino.
What the fuck is this bullshit?
No, but seriously, ever since the entrance exam, not to mention the sports festival, Shura has been understandably reluctant about letting Izuku use the quirk, which in turn might have led to them holding back a bit on training. I would personally suggest a middle ground. Wonder how Shura will react when Izuku gets back, having mastered full cowl almost perfectly. Okay, so I know the Vestiges are slightly OOC in this story, but listen, my headcanon is that after living for centuries in the confined space of someone's head, with only a handful of people to interact with, anyone would go insane. Seriously, they must have been born out of their minds, and now they're kind of overwhelmed with their new freedom. Are they gremlins? Absolutely. Do I regret it? Not at all. So, Izuku forgot his charger. Hopefully his phone can hold out for a week. Smiley face. Next up, we'll get some broccoli training montage. Hope you look forward to it. Thank you everyone for your continued patience and support. Life's been really busy lately and will probably keep that way, but I will try and update this story as often as I can. Though it might be every other weekend from now on. Hope you understand. Take care everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. I appreciate and love every single one of you. And that's a wrap on chapter 25. And oh my god, it's my first ever episode that's been over an hour long. Woo! Yay! Oh my god, I'm cringing. Sadahiko's voice. By the way, do we like Sadahiko or Sorahiko? Which one? Sorahiko or Sadahiko? Because one's very American and the other's Hispanic, because the only language I know is Spanish and a little bit of Vietnamese, but like Sadahiko, and that's not even a close Vietnamese accent. I only know how to say goodbye and hello. Sorry about that. But anyway, Sadahiko's accent started to lean into Southern. Guess y'all can guess where I'm from now. I just made that abundantly clear by saying y'all. Oh my god. Sorry about the southern western accent on Sadahiko's voice, because grandpa voice was difficult to figure out. I'm working on my vocal range, okay? I'm working on it. I know. I messed up so many times in this. I'm rambling. I really am rambling. Please go show the original author Texiliaz some love. And please leave me a comment, because I love reading comments. And bonus, I've just given you so much stuff to comment about. I've given you so much ammunition to scream at me about. So go do that, and I will heart your comment Even if you say the craziest, meanest thing you can possibly think of. Oh, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye, pups.